If you've been listening to some of my videos, you'll hear me say over and over again, the only thing that exists, story. Nothing can prove story doesn't exist. Now, let me prove to you that story is the only thing that exists by telling you nothing. Now, what was the only thing that exists when I said that word, nothing? What is the only thing that exists right now? The only thing that exists that you could say exists right now, that every single storyteller could say that exists right now. Now, we often hear the term that we're being mind controlled, and that, what's the other one? I have to think for a minute. Oh, you've been lied to, or it's all lies. It's all lies. And then there's that mind control thing and everything like that. And then what would happen in a world where there's all truth? What would happen in a world with all fact? If there was a world with all lies, imagine that, a world with all lies and all fiction. Imagine that. What would the world be? Well, go on then. What would it be? It would be a world of lies and fiction, or it could be the other world of truth and fact. And what have you got? You've got yourself the only thing that exists, and that's story. What's the difference between a truth and a lie? That the truth is the truth and the lie is the lie? Its story is the story, story is the story. I don't know. I don't know how to... I don't know how it's possible how is it possible that this would slip by you when in fact the slipping by you is it? It's a story. If I was to say, oh, look, no one understands what I'm talking about, that is not truth, that's not lie, that's story, because it can't be anything else. It would be fantastic for something else to exist, do you think? See, this is not about the truth or the lie. This is about what exists, and the only thing that exists, story, and nothing can prove story doesn't exist. There's this, what do we call them? Do you really think that there's someone else out there that has more advantage than you when it comes to story, right? Is there really someone out there that has a better value, or a better like has the advantage over you because of the only thing that exists, story? Well, that's a story. It's inescapable. How could we say this? If you were to tell me that someone has um, a better way of being able to live their life, what are you telling me? You're telling me story. Or are they telling you story? How did they get in the position they are without story? Were they born into something unique other were they born into something other than a story? Were they? Oh, they were born into wealth and power. And those aren't going to be story. You see, I'm not saying that you can discount like story. You can't say, oh, it's we can't just go around saying they're living in a story, and my story is different, and they've got a better story, and they live better because of their better story, because that would be story. Oh, I don't know. See, I'm not saying that the only thing that exists, story, and nothing can prove a story doesn't exist, to downplay your story or to boost your story. None of those things, I've never said anything like that. I'm not downplaying story and I'm not boosting story. I'm just exposing story for what it is, and that is story. And any downplay or any boosting of story is also story. It's inescapable. It's unbelievable. And it's completely and utterly just story. There's nothing. There is absolutely 100%, and saying this is a story, but it is a story that's storyable, isn't it? We can talk about understanding and knowledge. So who knows anything about story? Can we talk about story without using story? Can we put story over there in the corner and say, oh, look over there, this is how story works, this is what story's doing, they're all lying to us. Oh, and these ones here are telling the truth, and those ones over there, they're just not doing anything, they're like sheep, and these ones here are woken up and they're awake, and that's the sort of story that's happening there. So we just over here looking at their stories, and we know exactly what's going on, because we can put story aside and talk about story while right here is story doing that over there. That over there only exists because of one thing: story. That's the only reason that over there exists, that over here exists, that up there, down here, anywhere, the only reason it exists is because of story. Now you're going to say, don't be stupid, because the sun exists because it's a natural thing and all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't exist because it's the sun. It only exists because something storied it. If there was no story about the sun, and we're using the word exist again here, if there was no story about the sun, would the sun be the sun? Or would it just not exist? Because there was no one here to tell the story about the sun. Is there something out there that we haven't storied about? Well, that is a story about, is there something out there that we haven't storied about? It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, story, isn't it? When you realize that you can story up a story from absolutely nothing at all. Nothing at all. And I'll just explain this just to touch on that because we're talking about story. This is all storytelling. When someone has thought up a magical story, let's use an example. Harry Potter. Can that person or that story itself and reverse engineer itself to work out exactly at which point it was not a story before it gave birth to story? It's impossible, isn't it? Because from the very beginning, and I mean even the word beginning, the story beginning, it was and is and will always be forever and ever story. Reverse engineer the moment you started to understand what the hell is a story. And the story will tell you a story. You see, I don't get hung up on on making sure I'm careful with what story I tell. Because you know why? Because I can't control story. Because if you were able to control story, what story would you choose to control? Would you like to control the story that's affecting you right now? Go ahead. What would you use to control story? I think you'd have to use the only thing that exists, and that would be story. And story doesn't control story, does it? Because if story could control story, there'd be two story sources, wouldn't there? There would be story and then the other story thing that can control the story. Sounds complicated, but it's not. It's very simple. Because the only thing that exists, story, and nothing can prove story, doesn't exist. And the word and the story exist is story. There is nothing that escapes the existence of what it is or what this is, because the attempt to escape, the attempt to encase or to belong to is all there is, and that is story. Do you know what I really think is happening? Is that story has begun to engulf itself. I mean, it's really at peak story, isn't it? Can you say that there's a point in the future where story will be limited to just a few interesting elements about living your life? Nah, it's gone crazy. Story is everywhere, and story will be everywhere because story is the only thing that exists everywhere. And you might look up the road and see a car coming towards you and think, well, that's a car coming towards me. What did you say? What did you do? What did you think? It's a story, isn't it? Everything you do is story. There's nothing that escapes it. It's incredible. And if you try to change your story, that's a story about change. I think I covered that in one of my very first videos, that changing stories is just changing stories. Changing your mind is changing stories. Changing your belief is just changing story. I mean, not changing is story. Being brutally honest is story. Being a liar is story. Even being hung up about someone that's lying is story. And there's some evil people and there's evil acts, but there's also evil acts happening in nature, isn't there? Have a look around. I mean, does a shark attack because it's evil? Does a storm happen because it's evil? Do beautiful things happen because only beautiful things are happening, like a rose that just opens up? An amazing thing, isn't it? An explosion of colour and form. And yet we give it a story, we call it rose, but it doesn't rose, does it? It didn't rose, it didn't raise, it's storied. That's the story, it's storied. It doesn't know anything. It doesn't need to know anything. If you didn't have knowledge, you would still have the only thing that exists. That's what they know that you've got. That's what they work on. That's what they focus on. That's what they concentrate on. That's what they deal with every single day, is story. If you really think about what I'm thinking about and what I'm talking about right now, is you're talking about and thinking about maybe there's someone or something out there that is doing something other than story. But you need to think very deeply about what I said in the last video. When this wakes up, the very first thing that it does is the only thing that exists. Story. When you wake up tomorrow morning, I want you to think about nothing. And you will wake up now and go, oh, I'm going to think about nothing. I'm not going to have a thought about a story. And that's what you do. You do it. You're going to go to bed tonight and you're going to think, I'm not going to story when I wake up in the morning. I'm not just a story teller. I always think about, like, I always think about, like, God as an example and why he only ever used, if he exists, why he only ever uses the only thing that exists. Has he used anything else? Has he used anything else? And that means all gods. Imagine if gods didn't use the only thing that exists. Story. And it's beautiful, it's fantastic, it's amazing, because if you try to think now, oh look, it is a story, and now I don't get affected by that story. That is story having the only thing that it does, and that is storying. It's unbelievable. It's inescapable. I always say this one too about the atheist who says, I don't believe in God. And I always say to them, well, what did you just tell me a story about? And they said, well, I don't believe in God. I said, well, don't just remove the I don't believe. What did you just tell me a story about? And they say, I don't believe in God. I said, no, take the I don't believe in out, right? And tell me what you just told me a story about. And they said, well, not believing in God. And we just go around this loop. I said, you just told me you don't believe in something, and that something is the thing that you mentioned is God. So how do you know you don't believe in the story about God without using the story about God? The other one I use is the Santa one. Did you stop believing in, when you stopped believing in Santa, did the Santa story appear or disappear? And everyone has to say, well, I stopped believing in Santa. I said, no, you're not listening. I said, did the story about Santa appear or disappear? When you stop believing the story about Santa existing, did the story about Santa appear or disappear? Well, Santa believes he's got you right where he wants you. And that's in the story. It's impossible to be in a state of no story. Try it when you wake up tomorrow.